The first interesting thing that happened of 2005 was Harry getting assaulted and squeezed nearly to death by a man he'd never seen before, come Air Pup. Sirius Black had been released from St. Mungo's and was finally free to see his godson for the first time in 10 years. Though he had to meet Harry in Hogsmeade as opposed to Hogwarts, which still had Dementors flying around it. Understandably, the man never wanted to come within 1,000 feet of a Dementor again. His godfather brought him to a pub where he checked into a room and sat his godson down. "So, I've been hearing all sorts of things about the adventures we've been on for the last year. Not that I disapprove, but what was that about?" Harry shrugged. "When I first came to the wizarding world, they had books about my adventures too. I don't exactly remember doing those things either." Sirius smirked and continued, "And what's this about you dying last year? That's not exactly a joke even I would approve of." Harry shook his head and said, "I didn't have any say in that and I don't want to talk about it." "Did you like Skeeter's articles?" Sirius smiled and said, "Loved Pup. What did you have in mind for the second task? Can I help?" "I already finished preparing for that one, but there is something during the task you can do if you want though. I'll go over it with you later." Sirius's smile faltered and silence fell for a few moments. He said, "Can you forgive me, Harry? I wasn't there for you." Harry waited a few moments before answering back, "Things don't always go the way you wanted them to." Sirius raised an eyebrow and stated with a smirk, "Now when did the brat I used to change the diapers of get so wise? Don't tell anyone, but I am secretly a genius. Only 2 of my friends know and Dumbledore suspects, but he hasn't told anyone." "A genius, you say? We'll see about that." An hour later and Sirius Black was lying prone on the ground in defeat. He had thought trying to show his godson his animagus form and explaining how he succeeded in only a few years without professional help would convince Harry of his own amazingness. Harry ended up asking 20 or so questions regarding the animagus process, and now Harry was a large, nearly pure white snowy owl. It was a bit surprising that when he looked inside himself to see what his innate animal was, he quickly saw a familiar-looking snowy owl and felt a connection to it. After feeling out the process, he was able to shift his form into this owl. Sirius was very clear that you couldn't choose your animagus, it was something that was already a part of you, and Harry was not disappointed. The snowy owl was pretty much the largest species of owl and a bird of prey, top of the food chain. It was also native to the UK, Europe, and even North America, so it would not be out of place if he was seen flying around. Throw in the symbolism and the pure color and Harry allowed himself to feel more than a little pride at the quality of his inner animal. Sirius was dramatically banging his fist on the ground and called out, "Okay, you win, I give. You're a genius." The fact that Harry got the animagus perk in advance but didn't know how to use it until now was something he would never speak of. His godfather looked like his ego could use a little deflating. Harry shifted back and began talking with Sirius Black in earnest about whatever he could think of. The reason was simple: when Harry went from that hell of a cupboard to that heaven of his parents' arms, the act of his parents telling him about their lives was almost therapeutic. Sirius Black had just gotten out of his own personal hell of Azkaban, and Harry was now with one of the only 3 people in this world he considered family other than Lupin, who he couldn't find, and his cousin Andromeda. Harry told him about his life with the Dursleys, and only the fact that they had already been confirmed dead stopped Sirius from sending them on their way himself. Harry said he didn't remember what happened that night but showed up a year later in a park with new knowledge and a letter. It was that letter that told him to find out what happened to Sirius, which led to Harry getting the details from the goblins. Several parties tried to stall Sirius' trial through several means, but the goblins had already taken significant measures to prevent their interference beforehand in the week prior to the rat's capture. It was only thanks to that measure his godfather was a free man less than a month later. Sirius was surprised that not only had Harry captured the rat, but had arranged ahead of time for the interference of others. Had Harry simply gifted Pettigrew to the DMLE, Sirius would likely still be in Azkaban. After a few more hours of conversation, they had something of a plan which Harry later brought to Dumbledore, who immediately approved. Sirius would stay in Hogsmeade for the remainder of the school year, and every weekend Harry would be allowed to go to Hogsmeade, where his godfather would secretly train him to the best of his abilities. Dumbledore's smile could not be brighter when Harry asked this of him, and Dumbledore had no problem approving it. This did not constitute assistance from the school, as 3rd years and above were allowed to go anyways, and Harry, only being a first year, was at a disadvantage for not being allowed. Dumbledore even suggested using the path beneath the Whomping Willow to access Hogsmeade so the training could truly be done in secret. Harry figured Dumbledore had been looking for a way to make things up to Harry for some time, but the restrictions of the tournament had prevented many of the ideas he could think of. He couldn't even hire a private tutor for Harry, as paying for it himself or through Hogwarts was still considered assistance. Thankfully, Sirius was in no way a student or staff member of Hogwarts, and had the grounds not been covered in Dementors, Dumbledore would have allowed the man to use the guest quarters at the school. Dumbledore also suspected another reason for Harry's plan. Sirius had been locked away and useless for a full decade. Now he was being given the chance not only to keep in contact with one of the last remnants of his family, but also to feel useful by training Harry himself as the only person who could do so. When Dumbledore saw Sirius during their most recent meeting, the man had the fire of life once more burning in his eyes, something he sorely lacked when he visited the man at St. Mungo's a few weeks prior. Had Dumbledore known the other reason Harry set up this arrangement, he would not have been so pleased. Harry pretty much told Sirius he could memorize several books a week and asked him to bring some from the Black family library each weekend. Sirius wasn't thrilled with returning to his prior home, but he couldn't deny the request. Since Harry also told him the future was looking dangerous, Sirius also felt it would be wise to brush up on his family magics himself. The only part of the meeting that Harry didn't enjoy was Sirius's hysterical laughter when he answered a question that had been on Harry's mind since Sirius obtained his freedom. "What are you going to do about your lordship? You have a target on your back, since once you die, everything goes to some Death Eater, right?" Sirius had a maniacal grin when he said, "You mean what am I going to do about that fact that Malfoy wants me dead? I've already taken care of that pup. Should I die from anything but old age, you'll inherit everything, save a few trinkets for my favorite cousin and Moony." "What?" It was at that point, looking at Harry's dumbfounded expression, Sirius started a 5-minute laughing fit. Harry was tempted to hex the man, but this was likely healing him better than Street Mungo's had, so he couldn't in good conscience stop him. Next time though. 2 months passed quickly, and on the eve of the day of the second task, the red-headed twins came up to the common room and said, "Hermione, McGonagall said she needs to speak with you." Without looking up from the runes book Harry gave her for Christmas, she said, "No." The entire common room went silent. 1 or 2 students checked the windows to ensure the sky wasn't falling, as Hermione Granger had just refused instructions from a teacher. The twins looked equal parts impressed and distressed. Hermione told them, "I know what she wants and I have no intention of agreeing. Tell her to find someone else." Neville realized what she was referring to and said, "Me neither, I'm not a very good swimmer." The twins picked up on something and decided it was worth the risk to go along with it. They returned to McGonagall and gave her the pair's message. She was surprised they knew what she was going to ask, and not surprised they refused. If she were their age, she wouldn't want to do it either. There wasn't anything further she could do, so she asked the twins to fetch someone else. This time they did ask what for, as if the situation was worth refusing. They had the option of refusing to help. McGonagall caved, as the point of discretion was preventing Harry from learning of it in advance. The fact that he already knew made that pointless. When the twins thought it over, they agreed to fetch the student. They knew he'd agree to help, and he could in fact swim. That, and if Harry knew about it, he likely already had a plan. The next day had the whole school and the foreign delegates on some bleachers overlooking the lake. Several men with passive faces had been paid by someone to prevent anyone from approaching the lake for the past month. Cedric had already spent much of January practicing in the lake, so this didn't impede him much. It did, however, stop Fleur and Victor from practicing, as they only solved the egg after January. The one who paid these men was pleased when reports came in that there were no signs of Potter doing anything in the lake. He also made a few other arrangements to ensure the task went as he felt it should. Either do it with magic or not at all. Harry lined up on the docks with the other 3 contestants. Unlike them, Harry wasn't wearing clothes that would be comfortable when wet, which got a number of reactions, most of them concerned. Cedric simply raised an eyebrow and hoped the first year wouldn't show them all up too badly this time. Up in the sky was a shining silver Phoenix Patronus cast by Dumbledore at Harry's request to keep the Dementors as far from the lake as possible. Thanks to this, Sirius was able to join the audience to watch the task. Bagman used magic to turn himself into a loudspeaker and said for all to hear, "While our champions appear ready for the second task, and they have 1 hour to recover what has been taken from them. I have also been informed that to prevent outside interference, nothing not currently in the lake or on the champion's person is allowed in the lake. Any wizard approaching the lake will be stopped, and any object entering the lake will be destroyed." The man seemed completely ignorant that this would prevent Harry from using the same feat as last time. The reason Harry was sure of the man's ignorance was that he figured the man had bet on him and didn't seem dispirited at the new policy. Cedric and the other contestants all turned to face Harry and observed he still seemed lackadaisical about the new rule. Bagman continued, "On the count of 3 we shall begin. 1, 2, 3. The other contestants jumped into the water and waded out into the depths. Harry simply stood there while everyone watched him. The redheads both seemed a bit nervous. Suddenly something broke the surface of the water. Harry's submarine stopped right in front of the dock and opened the hatch on its own, just as the timer he set for it instructed. Harry jumped in and shouted, "Now Sirius," before closing the hatch and submerging the sub. Sirius Black got a trunk out and set several small items in front of the bleachers. He then used his wand to remove the shrinking magic on them, and now there were several 80-inch monitors in front of the bleachers. Hermione took over from there and used a remote to turn them on. Harry got a signal from his sub showing he was now live. On each monitor was a feed to one of the cameras on his sub looking out, and a picture of him inside the sub appeared in the corner of each monitor. Harry turned on a microphone and said, "Testing, testing, do you read?" Sirius smiled and picked up the microphone Hermione already turned on and handed to him. He said, "Padfoot to Potter, we read you loud and clear." "How you doing, Harry?" Harry responded from the monitor, "Not bad." For anyone who has no idea what is happening, the answer is magic. "We'll just leave it at that." Hermione shook her head but couldn't keep the smirk off her face. The main feed came from a camera in the front of the sub so the audience could see what Harry was seeing in the lake as if they were there with him. Bagman, who had removed his voice amplification charm, said, "Was that thing already in the lake?" Sirius said into the mic, "Harry, Mr. Bagman wants to know if your sub was already in the lake." Harry answered back from the monitors, "Yes, I parked it here last year. I would have just shrunk it and carried it like these monitors, but I can't use shrinking or enlarging charms, so I had to plan ahead." That was a lie, of course, but he still wanted people unaware of his skill in magic. Bagman nodded, that was not against the rules, so he had no problem with it. Sirius asked, "So what are you going to do, Harry?" "Well, there are 3 places of interest in the Black Lake. The sunken ship, the giant squid's nest, and the merman village. I'll be checking those out to see where whatever has been taken from me has been placed." Harry knew it was likely in the merman village, but he put a lot of effort into this, so he wanted to make it a show. Besides, the merman village was about a kilometer out and both the sunken ship and giant squid's nest were only a little out of the way. First stop was the ship. Harry turned on the headlights of the sub, which allowed the camera to see the ship they were closing in on. Harry spoke into his mic, "This, boys and girls, is the silver wand. Before the invention of portkeys in the 12th century, those incapable of apparition or without a flu relied on this ship to take them to and from Hogwarts each year. It was as traditional as the Hogwarts Express is now. It lasted for 2 centuries before it finally succumbed to the years when magic could no longer restore it. Here it has rested for the last 700 years. Harry drove the sub around the ship, turning the camera to an angle so the monitors would see it, though it wasn't what Harry was facing. Once done with the ship, he turned off the lights and piloted the sub further into the lake. He had in fact used a dozen submersible drones with cameras to map out the lake in the second week of December, so he had no problem finding things. A few of those drones placed markers around the lake bed Harry's sub could use to triangulate its own position in the lake and the position of everything else. Back on the surface and watching the screens, Bagman was slightly upset the spotlight had been taken from him. On the other hand, if Harry had done nothing, then the whole group would spend the next hour watching the surface of the lake waiting for something to happen. He decided to see it as an opportunity and took his time to consider the applications. Those who watched the monitors suddenly gasped and the lights turned back on, and the giant red squid was looking at Harry. Its enormous body completely dwarfing the small submersible. A tentacle reached out and wrapped itself around the sub, bringing it to the creature's eye. Harry turned the camera and dimmed the light so it could be seen clearly. Harry turned on the mic and said, "The bane of ancient mariners and students at Hogwarts, should the latter decide to go for a dip in the lake. Or at least that's what the chocolate frog card says." The squid released the sub and swam away a moment later. Harry continued, "The card isn't quite accurate, however. This squid is ticklish and enjoys bread, which some students often throw into the lake. This fellow is also known to scoop up any first year who falls out of the boat and drops them back in. It is of course a magical squid, as the non-magical types are not ticklish, do not live in freshwater, and do not eat bread." Harry let the lights shine on the ground for a few moments, revealing a lack of anything, before saying, "To the village." Hermione couldn't stop herself from rolling her eyes at Harry's narration. She looked around and confirmed most of the audience was engrossed in the monitors. Up to this point Harry hadn't used a single spell, so she wondered how he would be judged. 10 minutes later the monitors showed some Grindylows approach the sub and try to grab something. However, nothing they grabbed felt like flesh, so after a few moments they got bored and left Harry alone. Harry dimmed the lights further as the next area seemed to be magically lit. The monitors showed the whole of the merpeople village to many who had never seen it before. One of them approached Harry's sub and the monitor showed Harry waving back and smiling. The merperson swam away and the others simply stood outside their houses and watched Harry's small sub float past them on the underwater street. Harry turned his mic back on, not because he had something to say, but because the merpeople were singing and he felt the audience might want to listen. "An hour long you'll have to look, and to recover what we took. Your time's half gone, so tarry not, lest what you seek stays here to rot." Harry's face went a bit stern at that last line. He continued into the heart of the village where he saw a large statue of a merperson and tied to it by a cord of bundled weeds was 4 humans. Harry asked into the mic, "Which one's mine?" Sirius seemed more than a little amused and asked Dumbledore, "Which one is Harry's?" Dumbledore sighed when he remembered that his first pick and second pick had both figured it out ahead of time and refused. He said, "Ronald." Sirius said back into the mic, "Dumbledore says it's Ronald." Harry asked back, "Who?" Bagman said, "The small ginger boy," which Sirius repeated back. Harry noticed that one of the hostages was indeed the redhead he played chess with. He wasn't particularly great with faces, especially underwater. The location with the statue seemed to be a village square of some type and was surrounded by merpeople, most of which carried tridents. Luckily Harry's sub really wasn't that large so it did not appear threatening to them. It approached the hostages and Harry was inwardly glad he went with a sub instead of drones. How would drones free a bound hostage? Harry's sub of course had many extras built in for many circumstances. But there was something he had to do first. Harry spoke into the mic and said, "Hey, I need confirmation, will any hostage that doesn't get rescued actually be left here? I need someone to tell me otherwise or I'll get them all and damn the tournament." The camera shifted to the little girl floating in the water. The judges discussed this and determined there was not much point in leaving it out now. Dumbledore said, "The song is merely for atmosphere, no harm will come to those left in the care of the merpeople." Sirius said into the mic what Dumbledore told him and Harry let out a sigh of relief. He said, "Thank you." That being said, a mechanical arm came into the monitor screen and placed something against the red-headed hostage. It suddenly attached itself to him like a belt. Harry then attached another object to him which looked like a block with a fan. Harry then used an arm that had some shears on them to cut the rope. The yellow belt suddenly inflated which caused the redhead to quickly float to the surface. Harry switched the monitor feed from the front camera to the top camera. The merpeople around the village watched with interest and wondered what was going to happen. A moment before the hostage reached the surface, the inflated belt massively increased in size and became a raft that held the redhead above the water. The block he attached turned on and started dragging the raft in the direction of the shore like a small motorboat. Harry however piloted the sub off to the side and parked it there. He said back into the mic, "I hope you don't mind if I make 100% sure." Harry wasn't aware of it but the mother of the little girl was watching from the audience and was more than thankful that someone was keeping watch over her daughter. The rest of the audience had no problem with Harry as they now had the best seat in the house. The monitor had a full view of the statue and the remaining hostages so they'd be able to see what happened themselves. The judges were simply going to rely on what the merpeople told them had happened to score the contestants, but now they didn't have to. Harry's hostage had awoken in his raft that was currently speeding towards the shore. His brothers told him Harry would definitely rescue him but this was certainly not what he expected. Where was Harry? His raft arrived at the shore and he was met by people with blankets who explained what had already happened. A few minutes later Cedric came by and spotted Harry. He had a bubblehead charm and swam up to the Gryffindor first year and practically shouted, "Really, Harry?" He had no idea he was on television and that his reaction earned an assortment of laughs from the crowd. He shook his head and took out a knife to slice the ropes and free his hostage. Harry was tempted to give them another raft but decided against it. He already helped him enough. Another few minutes passed and a half-man half-shark appeared wearing a Durmstrang uniform. He too took a long look at Harry's sub while Harry waved back at him. The 7th-year seeker tried to rip through the rope binding his hostage with his hands but they were too slimy and thick. If the man asked for help he'd give him a knife but offering before he asked would be insulting. After a few moments of looking Victor found a sharp rock. He actually attempted to get one of the merman's tridents but they laughed at him. He used the rock to slice the rope then grabbed the line with his sharp jaws and swam away. A few more minutes passed and Harry said into the mic, "Time?" Sirius said, "Fleur's out. Seemed she got attacked by Grindylows. Time's up in 2 more minutes so if you have another of those boats feel free to use it." Harry's sub approached the statue again. One of the merpeople said, "Only one," through his glass. Harry said back, "I'll wait till time's up in a minute, okay?" The merperson thought about it for a moment before nodding. Sirius said though the mic, "Time's up, pup, bring her home." Harry already had an arm position to place another belt on her. He then attached not another motor block but a line which tied her to his sub. Harry cut the reed-corded rope and the belt inflated again. This time Harry's sub rose with the hostage, and the moment it reached the surface and turned into another raft, Harry floored it and sped the sub towards the shore. At full speed the kilometer back to shore was traversed in a few minutes. The sub landed ashore where another woman quickly made her way to the raft Harry was dragging and grabbed the little girl into her embrace. Harry opened the sub hatch and stepped onto the shore, still completely dry. Sirius chuckled and walked over to the sub to shrunk it for Harry as per the plan. Harry could tell from his smile that Sirius had a very good day. The scoring was a mixed bag. The Durmstrang headmaster gave him a 0 on account of the lack of magic Harry used. The fact that Harry got his hostage the fastest didn't mean anything to him. Dumbledore gave a 9 and Bagman another 10. Beauxbaton's headmistress gave an 8 for getting her champions hostage and for the interesting entertainment that came with it. Crouch gave a 7, saying he would have given a 10 had Harry used a single spell. Harry didn't particularly care about the points, but the quest said he would be penalized if he did not get full marks for the third task, so hopefully the scoring for that one would be different. The final task was on June 24th, giving Harry 4 months to prepare. What was interesting right after the second task was not the lack of a certain reporter's presence, but the presence itself. Harry had been waiting for her and he had been getting better at identifying specific energy signatures. He felt hers in the tent where he was going to meet his godfather, but he didn't see her. Though he did see a beetle that happened to be crammed with exotic energy. Harry whispered to Sirius, Animagus bug reporter, before saying aloud, "I'm really glad all those bribes Malfoy paid got some good information on the second task ahead of time." Sirius had been a part of more than just 1 or 2 pranks in his lifetime, so he knew how to improvise. He said, "Who can blame him? It's thanks to you. The man who controlled him is gone. What better way to thank you than helping from the side? Everyone cheats in a game like this." Harry asked, "Well, since I did as you asked and used Muggle toys, the odds of me winning should be in the negatives by now. Malfoy will definitely win back what he put towards this from the bets." Sirius nodded and said with a straight face, "Well, it's thanks to him no one knew I broke out of prison and rescued you from those Muggles. The winnings from those bets are definitely deserved. Good job with that Pettigrew thing. Now I don't have to pretend to still be in Azkaban." Harry asked with concern, "What do you think he is going to do to get me to win the last task?" Sirius answered, "Malfoy told me the last task will be some one-on-one duels. We'll get some Muggle toys that will let you beat the others easily. I think Malfoy said something about sabotaging the other contestants. I hope he doesn't infect them with dragonpox again. The last time he tried that it wasn't pretty. That poor fellow." Harry innocently asked, "Do I have to cheat?" Sirius answered in a hard tone, "Yes, if not for Malfoy helping me you'd still be with those horrible Muggles and I'd still be in Azkaban. We owe him a debt and wizards take debts very, very serious." Harry looked down in sadness, but in reality he was having trouble not laughing at that Sirius being serious line his godfather snuck in there. Harry left the tent and after a few moments he confirmed the beetle wasn't following before he couldn't take it anymore and collapsed into a fit of laughter. Sirius also took it as he cue and let it out as well. They laughed like a pair of madmen for a few minutes before his godfather asked, "Animagus bug reporter?" Harry nodded. "Skeeter, you know her?" His eyes shot up, "The one who did those lovely stories about my adventures?" Harry answered back, "I sensed her magic in a beetle in the tent. She showed up instantly after the last task and I was actually waiting for her. Instead of giving me another interview, she decided to play fly on the wall." Harry already told Sirius about his energy senses and his godfather took it into account during their magic practice over the last 2 months. Harry could almost predict what spell a person was going to cast before they cast it and he had no problem sensing spells from any direction. Once Sirius realized the very person Harry tricked into writing those ridiculous stories had just heard that performance of all things, he once more burst into a mad, cackling fit of laughter. Both of them were looking forward to what was to come. A week passed and neither were disappointed. The headline was titled "Conspiracy and Lies." It spoke of deceit and betrayal around the Triwizard Tournament and the betting that had been going on in the background and the dirty deeds mixed in. It listed unnamed sources that prove Sirius Black and Harry Potter were cheating the tournament to affect the betting pools due to a debt they owed to Lucius Malfoy for preventing the press from discovering the fact that Sirius Black had escaped prison long ago. The article also mentioned Malfoy's plan to infect the other contestants with dragonpox to ensure Harry's victory. Harry fell out of his chair laughing in the Great Hall. The small blonde Slytherin, who also seemed to be Malfoy, not Mofo like he previously thought, was very confused at the article. When the red-headed twins saw the article and realized what had happened, they bowed to Harry and declared him the Lord of Pranks. He actually got the Daily Prophet to post such an article for all of magical Britain to see. Outwardly Hermione declared it wasn't very funny, but Harry caught a few twitches of her lip as she worked to prevent a smile. At this point in Harry's schooling he had memorized every significant book in the library, including all the material from the restricted section. Harry already got Sirius to agree to take him to the Black family home for Easter vacation next month. Harry intended to memorize every book in that library and spend the rest of the vacation experimenting on projects he couldn't do in the Roar. At this point Harry had already reached the limit of the Roar for training. It couldn't provide greater than 10 times normal gravity, so Harry spent a large amount of time when he could just analyze the magic of the room to see how it was put together. Harry's weekday schedule consisted of waking up at 2 or 3 a.m. for hours after sleeping and heading to the Roar. He'd exercise to his limit, then spend time until morning either experimenting or studying. Much of his studying included charms, runes, and potions. He did buy a large amount of every ingredient and a nice cauldron, so he certainly wasn't going to let Snape stop him from mastering the art. One problem most people had with potions was that they expired after a while. Since time in Harry's inventory didn't move, Harry had stocked an impressive amount of potions and had every intention of increasing that number. The 2 hours before breakfast he'd use battle meditation to earn energy and then return to the dorm in time to join the others on their way to breakfast. The higher his level, the more he needed to level up, and it was already taking 3 days to level at this point. The twins somehow found out about Harry's training and asked him where he went each night. Harry told them about the Roar, which gave the pair some nasty smiles. After classes Harry would tutor Neville and Hermione, the latter getting tutored longer as she was also learning high school classes. Harry would first go over what they learned the prior week to ensure retention of the lesson, then go over the theory of the new lesson, then the practical application. Hermione benefited more from the theory, but Neville learned more from the practical. Both were now doing the equivalent of their fourth-year classes, which for Hermione included the electives of ancient runes and arithmancy. He was also giving her a basic foundation for alchemy by showing her where certain branches of chemistry were applicable in transfiguration and potions. At one point, Hermione jokingly said, "Harry, we're going to run out of things to study soon. Whatever will we do next year?" Harry, however, couldn't meet her in the eye. "Harry?" "Hermione, I don't think I'm coming back next year," he honestly answered. "What? Why?" "I've already memorized the library, Hermione. The whole thing. Other than teaching you and Neville, there isn't much left for me to do here." "But you can't leave, you're still underaged. You'll not be allowed to perform magic unless you graduate." Harry shook his head. "Actually, the law says that anyone who doesn't graduate Hogwarts will have their wand snapped and will be forbidden from acquiring another. That doesn't apply to me as I've never used a wand. Also, my entry into the Triwizard Tournament has actually made me a legal adult. I haven't been an underage wizard since the 31st of October. Hermione looked downtrodden. Harry asked with a little hope, "Do you want to come with me?" She looked up and saw that it was a genuine offer. She could leave Hogwarts and return to the Muggle world. She wouldn't be allowed a wand, but she had already taken steps to learn intent-based wandless magic and had confidence she wouldn't need her wand forever. That being said, "I'm sorry, Harry, but I can't." Harry gave a weak smile and said, "That's okay. Can I ask why though?" She answered, "Do you remember what you said when I asked you if you were from a wizard family or a Muggleborn?" Harry half smirked and repeated back, "Neither. I am an anomaly, an aberration, a tear in reality and a magnet of impending doom. You have been warned." She nodded and said, "This has been the most exciting, the most terrifying, the most insightful, and the most amazing year of my entire life. Warning or not, I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. But to be honest, Harry, I can't keep doing this. I'm getting burned out. If each of the remaining years of my life are less eventful or even boring, I'd be okay with that. But I know that if I stayed with you, this would just be the beginning, wouldn't it?" Harry nodded. He'd grow to like Hermione, then really like her, maybe even more. But he knew that she was right. She was an amazing person, but she was perfectly happy with being a big fish in a little pond. He knew it would be different if he relied on her. She was the type to go above and beyond for anyone in need, but the fact was, he didn't rely on her. Harry said, "Well then, I promise to at least continue to write when I can." She smiled sweetly and said, "I'd like that, Harry." She was happy she wasn't going to lose her friend. Harry's weekdays were almost nothing when compared to his weekends. Sirius would be considered a level 120 wizard with a magic rank of 20, close to 21. When Harry started sparring with him, his own magic path rank was at 16. Thanks to this difference, Sirius had been thrashing Harry for 3 hours a day every Saturday and Sunday. Few knew it, but Sirius Black was actually the strongest wizard below Voldemort and Dumbledore in the whole of Britain. Some thought it was the Charms Professor Flitwick or the Transfiguration Mistress McGonagall, but Sirius could defeat either without difficulty if it came to a fight. Sure, Flitwick was a champion duelist, but duels had rules, etiquette, restrictions. Flitwick's strengths thrived in a fight with such limitations for him and his opponent. But in a fight that didn't have any rules, Sirius would win. McGonagall was the second best user of transfiguration magic in Britain behind Dumbledore, but Transfigurations was a flashy, power-intensive magic that looked impressive but lacked finesse. In a fight without rules she was weaker than Flitwick. Not that either were considered weak, both were equal if not a hair stronger than Voldemort's supposed second-in-command Bellatrix Lestrange. But compared to Sirius Black both were lacking. He'd been raised with access to the Black family library, yet he had the heart of a knight and the soul of a prankster. He had a reason to become strong, the means to do it, and a mischievous perspective that allowed him to easily think outside the box. The only person on Voldemort's side who could defeat him in a one-on-one fight was Voldemort himself. Even on a bad day, Sirius could play with his cousin Bellatrix without difficulty and even make a show of it. Once Sirius understood Harry's skill level, he dueled his godson without holding back. Harry actually had to brew potions to recover stamina for his godfather so he could put everything into each duel before collapsing. The results however spoke for themselves. Harry's magic path rank had increased to 18 and he wanted to get it to 21 before the third task. Once Easter break started, the training was amped up to another level. Harry put every single book of the extensive Black family library in his inventory and then spent what may have been a full year paused before coming out of it. He'd never spent that long paused before because it would distance him from others. However, since Hermione pretty much dumped him, he didn't have a reason to hold back. And that was just the first day. For 2 weeks Harry would spend some unknown time paused going over everything and then unpause and experiment, and finally he would duel Sirius for 3 hours and then digest the practical experience before experimenting some more. Oh, and Harry and Sirius saw something both of them wished they had never seen. On the second day of Easter vacation, the Black family house elf shouted at Goose and told her she was a disgusting creature of the filthy half-blood. Harry had taken Goose with him since he had no intention of leaving her at Hogwarts, and he still spent some time each day chatting with her or petting her. Goose's response to the elf's accusation was to open her mouth and release a swarm of horrible purple tentacles and teeth more terrifying than anything the pair had ever seen. The tentacles grabbed the elf and he screamed and cried out and seemed to try to escape using elf apparition and elf magic, but once bound by the tentacles, it seemed ineffective. The tentacles drew the deranged house elf into Goose's mouth, where they disappeared behind the snapping sound of those unspeakable teeth, which then completely withdrew into her body. Both witnesses agreed never to speak of the incident again. Once Harry got into his rhythm, he realized how much he underestimated the Black family history and magic itself. The Black family had more volumes of grimoires on various types of magics than the Potter family, the Hogwarts library, and Salazar Slytherin's study combined. It wasn't too surprising, as a grimoire is something written specifically by a witch or wizard about their own experiences with magic. A lifetime's worth of wisdom and comprehension on magic, and the Black family library had over 200 of them. Many grimoires dated back to before the time of Hogwarts. There were even a few encoded passages you wouldn't understand without reading the lot, and once Harry had gone over them all a few times, he cracked the code to the deeper aspects as well. Exotic energy was not the only energy that could be used for magic, but it was the only one witches and wizards used. Every generation of Blacks felt that magic powered by exotic energy was the strongest, as other forms of magic would manipulate the rules of nature to achieve the effect, while exotic energy magic rewrote the rules of nature to achieve the effect. One was clearly more powerful than the other. However, there was a problem with that. Each wizard's exotic energy reserve was limited. Other sources of energy were not. Someone using nature energy, which fills the air, could use magic to create a thunderstorm and call down lightning with only some difficulty. Wizards could perhaps do the same or more if they had the reserves, but no witch or wizard had enough internal exotic energy to compare the amount of nature energy that flowed freely outside. It was like comparing a bucket of spring water to a fire hydrant connected to a city's water system. Quantity over quality. Many members of the Black family sought to fix that. They tried to combine their exotic energy reserves with external energies like the energy of nature or dimensional energy. They blew up. Harry figured from cross-referencing history books that every wizard who had gone down the path of mixing energies had exploded. Not figuratively either. Their bodies weren't built to store energy like that. Theirs weren't, but Harry's was. Unfortunately, it was not that easy. Harry tried absorbing dimensional energy and natural energy through his battle meditation, but even if used to increase the level of his body, it didn't allow him to control it or use it to power his magic. He tried to control external dimensional energy, but it wouldn't move as he wished it to. Even if it did, he wouldn't be able to master it before June, so he decided to work on that if he was still alive once summer started. The Black family home itself had many quaint features and random curses on the floors, doors, and items. Harry could see magic, so they didn't catch him unaware, but most of it was odd. Especially that locket in the downstairs drawer. From his senses it looked like a mass of black tentacles trying to infect others, so he didn't want to even put it in his inventory. For 16 days Harry considered this place his home, since for all intents and purposes, his family was here. However, all good things eventually come to an end. At least when the end of the holiday came around, Harry's stats looked much better. Harry Potter Level 112 Age 11 STR 80 AGI 201 INT 300 WIS 300 LUK 20 Warrior Path Rank 13 Scholar Path Rank 17 Magic Path Rank 20 Tech Path Rank 11 Crafting Path Rank 6. Harry spent most of the second week in battle meditation when he wasn't sparring with Sirius. Harry was now able to reliably beat him without having to use blood magic to boost the strength of his spells. Harry was now a master at dodging spell fire thanks to his energy senses and agility. He also finally relented and added a few points to luck, since experimenting was partially reliant on luck and he had many more experiments to attempt. Once Harry returned to Hogwarts, he found some good news and bad news. The good news was that the Dementors had left the grounds. Sirius even agreed to accept Dumbledore's offer and move into a guest room once he found out. The bad news was that there had been a mass breakout of Azkaban and the Dementors were no longer following the direction of the Ministry of Magic. Yeah, that was bad. Also, Harry's request for the goblins to acquire some Muggle firearms for him was denied. Their letter did explain why though. Muggle ammo did in fact tend to go off on its own when stored in a magic-rich area, when magic was used near it, or when used by a magical being. Thanks to that, it was too dangerous to get near, and Gringotts had very specific policies on them. There were even stories of magicals losing fingers or even getting killed just trying to load a Muggle gun. They didn't even have any suggestions on where to get some himself. They stated that in 1997 handguns were made pretty much illegal, so outside of rifles for sport, there were no means to acquire concealable firearms. You couldn't even walk into a store that sold rifles and use magic on the clerk, since the ammo in the store would go off. Harry really wanted one for Plan M, even if he had to manually inscribe every bullet, but it seemed it wasn't going to be that easy. He wanted to face Voldemort and his Death Eaters and whip out 2 Tommy guns and shout, "Say hello to my little friends." He doubted anyone at the time would get the reference, but it would still be satisfying to say. During the second week of April, Harry complained about this problem to Hermione and Neville. Neville was not surprised. Harry thought he would have to face Death Eaters and understood why he wanted a gun. When Harry explained how a fast-moving bullet could go through any magic shield, Neville certainly saw why they appealed to Harry. Hermione, of course being Hermione, made Harry feel like an idiot by asking, "Why can't you make a magic gun that shoots solid bullets using magic?" Harry then spent the next 30 seconds banging his head against the table while Hermione gave him her smuggest grin to date. Although Harry had access to more magical knowledge than anyone in the school, that didn't mean the answers to some questions would just pop into his head. Did he know a dozen different potions recipes that could make something as good or better than gunpowder? Yes. Did he know metal transfiguration spells that would let him mold or strengthen metal to any form? Of course he did. Did he know runes he could directly carve onto bullets that would make them more powerful than an anti-tank round? Why yes he did. But until Hermione mentioned it, he didn't put it all together. Once Harry finished banging his head, he grabbed a parchment and drew a basic schematic of his idea. A few minutes later he walked over to a place he never thought he'd go. He knocked on the door and a few moments later it opened wide and he was faced with the perpetual sneer of Hogwarts. "Potter. What do you want?" Harry said, Can we speak inside? The potions professor was tempted to refuse, but his curiosity got the better of him. Why not? Harry entered and the man closed the door. Harry said, "It's not like I haven't enjoyed our game these last few months, but I need your help with something." Snape didn't seem surprised in the slightest. Harry knew his distaste for him was an act. Mostly anyways. The fact that Harry figured it out and went along with it would help Snape in the long run. But a meeting such as this was dangerous. Should Voldemort return, Snape would be expected to return to his side. The Dark Lord's skill at mind reading was nothing to look down at, and Snape preferred there to be as few interactions between himself and Potter where they were amicable as possible. Snape easily said, "As you know, according to the rules of the tournament, a member of the staff such as myself cannot assist you with anything." Harry smiled at the wording and ignored it before getting out the schematic he drew earlier. He said, "Since we don't know what the final task is yet, this can't be considered assistance for the tournament. I'm going to make this to kill you-know-who and any Death Eater who comes for my life. Do you know how a gun works?" Harry didn't avoid Voldemort's name out of fear but simple politeness. Proving you could say it without flinching was about as classy as swearing during a dinner conversation to prove you were above caring for such things. Snape took the paper and noticed the Muggle weapon shape, but the composition of the gunpowder was written with a potion recipe. Not one he'd heard of, as it was obviously meant for detonation, but that was beside the point. He'd also recognized the runes that would operate the device that may as well have been called an artifact considering how it functioned. A chill went down his spine as he imagined the power behind such an artifact. And it would work too. Mostly. Snape let out a deep sigh and handed back the paper. He said, "I cannot be a part of this." If Voldemort ever saw this memory, Snape would certainly be killed. He didn't mind death as he knew he deserved worse, but he would still prefer a less meaningless death. Harry had already figured out Snape's angle and after a few moments said, "No one knows I came here. What if you give me all the advice you can think of, then obliviate yourself of the conversation? Then we go back to how we were before." Asking anyone else to obliviate themselves would earn a broken nose, but it was perfectly reasonable advice to a double agent. Snape took more time than he thought to consider it. After a full 2 minutes he said, "Under 2 conditions. First, I want you to answer every single question I have for you. Tell me what plans you already have and how strong you actually are. You've done a remarkable job until now playing the part of a simple, slightly above average student. Should anyone ask, I can make myself believe it to be true even under Veritaserum or Legilimency, but if we're going to do this I need everything. Second, before I obliviate myself, I will write myself a letter and give it to you. If you successfully kill the dark bastard, then you will return it to me. Do we have a deal?" Harry held out a hand without hesitation and they shook on it. Harry told him as much as he could without telling him that he was pretty much a video game character, though he did give a summary of the effects. The extra details he asked Snape not to include in his letter. Once Snape understood the relevant points he said, "Let me understand this. You are a mutant obscurial immune to the killing curse and poison. If you die from anything else you can easily, albeit painfully, come back to life, though a little weaker. You have a timeless, internal pocket dimension of unlimited size. You are already stronger than myself and that foolish godfather of yours. And yet you intend on coming up with a method to defeat Voldemort, all his Death Eaters, and 100 Dementors, without revealing any of these facts to others." Harry said, "I also have the dissected parts of a basilisk corpse." Snape looked longingly to his shelves at his bottle of Ogden's finest fire whiskey but knew that it would be a waste to drink it for a conversation he won't remember. The potions professor said, "Dumbledore hid the Sorcerer's Stone in the passage behind the 3rd floor corridor. Unfortunately, it seems to have been stolen during the second task." Harry felt his stomach drop. That wasn't good. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.